if you have a heart for Jesus, if you have a heart for people, Haiti is an easy place, to fully invest, in that area.
Yeah. I would love, Al, whatever you find to be important about yourself, just break the ice, introduce yourself, who you are, what you dad first, husband first, son of God first, whatever you find important to share about yourself, introduce yourself to whoever be listening today.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm Al Almando with Jean-Louis. Al for short, born and raised in Haiti. I did not grow up in a Christian family, but I grew up as a churchgoer.
Sure.
As you know, we would embark every Sunday morning and go to church. We've started going to church at a Catholic church, and my dad would go to an Episcopalian church.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were getting older, I say we, myself, my 4 siblings, and mom and dad, as we moved to the city from the country of Haiti, we started going to Christian church.
Okay.
And if I want to put that in context, Haiti has a country and city, and country being a place where there's no running water, no electricity, it's like stepping back in time 100 years ago, back. So that's where I was born, in the southeastern part of Haiti, and moved to the city for further education.
Sure. Which is pretty common.
Which is very common, actually. Common, yeah. Every parent who have the opportunity, or who have a family member who have the opportunity in Haiti, usually move from the countryside to the city, where they can have better access to healthcare, education, and so forth. So that was the case for my family. Yeah. So we moved to the city for education, and I went to a private school. And so did my siblings as well.
Yeah. Which is a real privilege.
A privilege, actually. It is a privilege.
I was picking on you on our car ride, because I wasn't sure if you were part of the bourgeois, the big money in Haiti, but yours actually came on the back of hard work, your own, as far as education and scores, and then an uncle that worked as a tradesman to provide some funds.
Exactly.
It's really awesome.
So it is a privilege, knowing how many kids that do not have that opportunity to go to school and have through college. I was able to, after graduating high school, I entered the state university, and that's a competition. Only the best will make it.
Yeah.
So I studied linguistics. Well, let's fast forward. Anyways, in 2000. Into the year 2000, that's when I became a believer.
Okay.
I had my second birth, my most important birth.
You and I were just months apart then. So
really?
I gave my life to the Lord December 8th of 99. So
it was in December as well?
That's what I was going to say. Just that January would be 2000. So it's just...
yeah, so the church...
just a year older than...
Yeah, the church I attended... exactly. They used to have, till now, it's a mega church. They host a month long of service. They call it Revival, Live, every December. So it's one of those nights that after an altar call, I walked down the aisle and I was ready, man. I was ready to meet my Lord and Savior. So
that's awesome.
Never regret that decision to follow the one true Lord. So, and then I started singing in different choirs and got involved in the music ministry at the church, and all the way through college, actually.
You were a part of the music ministry there at the church?
Yeah. So I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. I love them to death. We get along very well. One of my brothers is a doctor. One's a businessman. One's a mechanic. and my sister can make any types of dress you ask her for.
It's quite the seamstress, yeah.
We are a very hardworking family, and that's the case for most Haitian families. Very hardworking people.
Let's dive into some of that. So we've got you saved.
Mm-hmm.
We got you through college. How did you get to the United States?
Well,
I remember meeting you and you saying, "This is not where I ever planned on being. This is not where I meant to land." But here you are in San Antonio, a stone's throw away from my house.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, my human eyes, my limitation, it was accidental.
Yeah.
I met my wife through the organization I was working with. After I'm gonna go back to the earthquake. That's a good way to start there. After the devastating earthquake that hit the west part of Haiti in 2010, I was still in college. Actually, the day, this January 12th of 2010, 4:53. That's when that earthquake happened. I'll never forget it. I was in college that day, and I just happened to leave earlier. And unfortunately, that building, among thousands of other buildings, went down, and over 200 students died.
In the same building
I was in.
Could have or should have been in that day.
Exactly. So.
And that story, I mean, many people don't understand the magnitude of this earthquake, and for some reason, news happens so fast. Sometimes we forget. Mm-hmm. But the conservative numbers of that earthquake are upwards of 300,000 dead. Yeah. I've heard 400,000, but
320,000.
Passed in a very small area. It's not like the entire country was hit. It was just a particular area, and I've had the privilege of sitting next to and talking to other people just like yourself, where somehow God moved them at the right time and spared their life, but that was not the case for hundreds of thousands of others.
It's a very difficult thing, because we know that God loves everyone. God. We always say that God's love is not a cake. If you cut a piece, the cake gets smaller. Yeah. We know that God loves everyone. With the same compassion. Yeah. But we hear a lot of stories. I mean, I happened to leave earlier. I have a cousin who was supposed to go to school, and he got to the door and just turned around.
Just decided to.
I have a brother who was in high school. He just happened to have a fever that day. So that fever spared his life. I mean, God chose to spare his life.
It's amazing.
And his best buddy, whom he would sit right next to, died.
Yeah.
So you hear a lot of the stories. At the same time, you hear people who lost 19 members of their families.
Yeah, and that. So this is where kind of we don't know each other this time, but this is where our worlds intersect. That 2010 is also what brought me down to Haiti and began kind of the first love of the country, and even ties into the story of current events. A good portion of the people that are passing the border and are trying to seek asylum and refuge today, some of that even stems from a Haiti that was devastated by an earthquake that just has never recovered from.
Exactly.
I mean, it's been in different forms of turmoil over the years, but that day really changed a lot of things. So you're in 2010 earthquake season, and you're meeting somebody special.
Yeah. In June of 2010, I started working with one of the organizations that came to Haiti to do relief work. My church happened to be the first church that they came in contact with.
So this is an American organization or a Western organization coming to work with your church?
U.S.-based organization based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I happened to be the first Haitian that they hired through my pastor, because I was serving at the church as a choir, member and musician, drummer. So after the earthquake, I decided to teach English at the church because everybody was scared to use the facility. So I used it to teach English, and I had a massive group of students. who wanted to learn English, and that came to be a great opportunity for whoever spoke English with all the organizations that were flooding Haiti to do relief work. So that's how I came in contact with the organization when they came to introduce their mission and what they wanted to do to my pastor, and my pastor called me to translate for him, and so met with the representatives of the organization that came, and they had a team scheduled to come. So when that team came, I had a week of orientation with them, and then I became and I was hired the second week they came. And my wife came in August to help lead a trip, and not my wife.
Not your wife at the time, but who becomes
exactly the lady who became my wife.
I'm cracking you.
So she came, and we served together, and we realized that we shared a huge passion for worship, for mission in general. So we spent a lot of time praying together, worshiping together, praying over the team, and we became friends. I mean, it was not love at first sight, guaranteed. We just became friends.
Yes.
And
eventually soulmates.
Eventually soulmate. Exactly.
Now, what's surprising, what's amazing, is you and your love for your country, and where you felt called. She chose to stay and live with you in Haiti. So
exactly.
You guys not only get married, but instead of you following her to the States, you guys stay and create a life for yourselves in Haiti.
Yep. And besides love, that was actually one of the reasons why we embarked in that relationship, because she wanted to be in Haiti, and that's where I always wanted to be. And so we got engaged, dated for about a year, engaged for 3 months, and we got married in February of 2012. Yeah. Long story. I mean, fast forward, now we have 4 children. Yeah. And that was the first year I also came to the United States to visit with her family. Yeah. I first came in 2012, and we were very busy with the organization. We both became full-time in 2012.
Working for the organization.
Hosting a lot of people, taking care of all the logistics.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand. So Haiti being hour and a half flight from Miami, it's always been a strong mission field, especially for Western people, for various different reasons. But boy, when the national attention was focused on Haiti with an earthquake that size, and the amount of NGOs and organizations that flooded in there,
3,000.
It did. It changed the face of the country quickly, and in some ways for a great benefit. I mean, it was helpful, but it also became, politically, there's a lot of money moving in between the hands of people, and hard to account for it all. But nevertheless, you're there and serving through it all with your wife.
Yep, we were there from 2012 up until 2017. We were really, really busy hosting anywhere between 12 to 1,400 missionaries, people who came to help. That averaged between 60 to 70 groups a year. So we were really, really busy because it's not just getting them there. We had to have the logistics, to receive them, feed them, transport them, find staff, people to translate for them. So we had our hands full.
Yeah. So I don't want to connect dots for you, but you said from 2012 to 2017, if you're anything like I was around 2017, this begins the change of administration, presidents, where all of a sudden what was once a safe country to travel and taking visitors through starts to change. Is that what was kind of happening?
I go all the way to 2017 because that year was the end of our busyness as far as welcoming people, mission teams who came from all over the U.S. to do relief work in Haiti. We had 2 teams in 2018, and it all stopped in July of 2018. Yeah. When the whole country took a different shift. I mean, it was a radical shift. I mean, politically, we had a government against the people. I mean, everything changed. Yeah.
Do you remember where you were that day?
I was stuck away from my family that very day. I mean, that day, I don't remember the day, but it was sometime in July of 2018. That was a soccer game. I mean, Haitians love soccer.
It was the World Cup.
Haitians love soccer. I mean, especially
I think it was Argentina versus Brazil. I think it was Argentina.
And it's like, I mean, for some reasons, those two teams divide the country in two.
Yes.
You know,
a little more to the Brazil side, but definitely division.
So unfortunately, the president, I mean, there's something that leads to it. I don't want to get into those details.
Right. But he uses this moment where he knows every Haitian's eyes are tuned into the news and on the television screen.
Yep. So he used that moment to announce a significant raise on gas price. I mean, over 50%.
I think it was actually 150%. It was dollars more per liter.
Exactly. So, unfortunately, I think Brazil lost the game.
They did.
Which on a normal day would cause anger.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, you have to understand that gas price in Haiti affects everything.
And we would say that also here in America, like so much of our transport, everything is, but I don't think anyone ever quite understands to the extent. One, you've got roughly, let's say 7 to 8 million working people, or at least people trying to move about Haiti. Mm-hmm. That is all public transit. Mm-hmm. So you are used to a fixed amount of money to go from depot to depot on a tap or on, what would be their public transportation. You change that. That has to change that next morning. Meaning if you had, let's say 35 cents, you're thinking to yourself, where am I going to come up with 50 cents tomorrow to get, and it literally just compounds everything. As far as how much it costs for Coca-Cola to get from one part of the island to the other, fruits to get from one part of the island. I mean, literally everything.
And usually it's at the detriment. That change is detrimental, for the majority, because what happens is when you put a penny on the gas. I mean, I'm gonna say low.
Yeah.
You have, everybody takes advantage of it. I mean, you have the price of a Coca-Cola, like you said, everything except what people get. Except what people make.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
the criminal wage stays the same.
So what Al is saying, I'm guessing you guys are picking this up too, but it's a hard concept for us to understand here stateside. But imagine, we're talking about the difference between inflation and adjustment in pay. Say tomorrow everything became double the price in the United States, but your pay doesn't change. You still make the same amount of pay. So for anybody that's living paycheck to paycheck already in the United States, tomorrow you either just can't buy the things that you need, or you need to go in debt. On the Haiti side, where people would struggle with that, is most of us as Americans don't understand at what level of survival they're at already every day. The average person that's drinking any water has to pay, for a few bags of water, any amount of food whatsoever. It's not like there's a refrigerator full of food. There's a daily look. You're looking daily for a meal. So like you said, at any moment that anything rises, even a penny, that now is just hitting like a crucial area of their life, a survival area of their life. It doesn't mean like, we just don't get to go to the movies this weekend, honey, or we might need to cut back on our sodas. Yeah. I mean, it literally means I can't either send my kids to school, or I can't pay my rent, or I can't buy food this week. It's extreme.
Yeah, it affects everything. I mean, you think about, it's not a country where you have electricity, right? Most people who actually have a freezer running are either on solar or most of the time on a generator. So then gas goes up, then those people have to pay more to run their generators. The taxi drivers have to pay more to run their taps. And sometimes because of the infrastructure, the road structure, they can burn all that gas sitting on a spot, in a 1 or 2 mile radius. They burn all the gas because they're stuck in traffic. So it affects everything. And so raising that
so price, we heard that. So right after the soccer game, he announces
raising the gas by over 100%. I mean, it simply means that the next day nobody would be able to afford their daily bread.
Yeah.
So that was for the first time. I mean, I was on the road and I had no idea what was going on. So I was driving a team from the airport to the north part of Haiti, and all of a sudden the roads were filled with people, and within seconds,
Mhm.
I had to pull in a gas station because we could not go anywhere. The whole city
Yeah.
was on fire.
Yeah.
Not saying everything
When you
was
say
burning,
on fire, no, but every intersection possible and every road. So I was in Delma 32, so kind of right in the heart of the city,
hmm
and I had heard over the radio what was going to happen. I was actually watching parts of the game. I had a team helping with malnourished children, and I was just kind of taking a backseat because I knew some things were going on in the city. And you're right, man. Once that announcement was made, I had our team packed up. I think we were in 3 vehicles that day, and there was not an intersection. There was not an intersection open.
Nope.
Some of them were instantly starting to close up. Everything from the side of the road is coming into the road, anywhere from merchants' tables to tires to rocks to everything. That I probably made it just around a mile, probably from Delma 32 from the cut to Servotel. I had to pass 2 major intersections, and it was so fresh. Like this was, I would be willing to bet 15 minutes. But from that moment on, for the next few days, there was zero movement on the
So, just so people understand, in Haiti, you have Port-au-Prince. That's the main hub.
Yeah.
The biggest city. I mean, that's the biggest city. Per square
Yeah.
footage. But population wise, it's really dense. I mean, 4 million, 5 million, where there was supposed to be 360,000.
Yeah.
So
city built for 360,000, 4 million.
4 million
living
living in it. So you have 3 major roads. Haiti is divided into 10 departments, what we would call 10 states here. And you have 3 major roads, National Road 1, National Road 2, and 3. And when you block one road, you block at least 5 departments.
Yeah.
So you block millions. So historically that's how people, show their anger when they want to get the government's attention, block a road.
Yeah.
Because if you block a road,
the
president might not be able to go anywhere.
Yeah, it's like stopping a main artery. The flow of the entire country slows down as far as, like I said, goods and services, everything slows down. So yes, it's the way they get attention.
So for 3 days, that's the country was locked down.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no transportation. It was the first time. Usually, on a normal day, there would be roadblock or some protest in some areas, but that was the whole country.
The entire country.
The entire country said, no, we cannot afford this. We cannot do that, until the president took on the radio and said, sorry, it was a mistake. Yeah. But it didn't end there. No. It was the beginning of a new era for Haiti.
Yeah. And that's where we got to we'll have to try to walk through a little bit. This is emotional for both of us. This is where Al and I really bond through the agony of that date until the date that we arrived in the States, because there may be a very few listeners that were there and can understand it. But from a distance, it's much like the heat of a battle or a war. Unless you are there and you saw that war, you can't quite understand it. Some days were much worse than others, but even on the good days, they were almost more dangerous because you could find yourself, in harm's way really quick. An intersection, a street, an area, a department could lock up again. And it could be seen as violent.
As far as I can remember, growing up in Haiti, there's never a government that can please everybody. I mean, you can't find that anywhere in the world where, humans can please, all the humans around them. But the difference is that back in the days, if there's something happening in Cité Soleil, one of the, biggest suburbs in Haiti, you could go around it.
Yeah.
You could wait, until you don't see the roadblocks anywhere. Police could come in and clear the roads.
Yeah.
But since after that date in July of 2018, the roadblocks were not, they were guarded.
Yeah.
I mean, they were usually armed gangs who would guard their roadblocks. And that is something that that deprived my family from our freedom that we used to have. I mean, we've ridden a lot of storms, but that one, I remember, in 2018, we bought a second vehicle so that my wife could go, have girls' day with my daughter. We would have some friends who would visit from the United States, and she would take them, show them the country. But in 2018, she lost that freedom to drive by herself. If we went anywhere, we had to be together. Yeah. And in addition to being together, we had to be ready to leave. So we had a go bag. We came with the concept of a go bag that would have our important documents, change, the essentials, so that, if we go across the country where we'd usually go for grocery shopping or for me to buy materials with, to do my woodworking stuff. So we would go with a go bag in case we get stuck at the airport. Yeah. If something dangerous would pop up, we would stay there at a hotel until we could go home, or we would simply fly to the States if it gets out of hand. Yeah. So we found ourselves staying at home most of the time and looking for an opportunity, to go anywhere. And we would go and be ready for a month, with groceries. Thankfully I have my own solar system, at our house where we can have a freezer running. So we would have and shop for a month at a time, and hoping that we can go when we run out of supply. So that was kind of the situation for us through the rest of 2018 going
into 2020.
Into 20.
Let me jump on that real quick, and we'll pick up from there. But I really want anybody that's listening to understand, we both, obviously, coming as an American into Haiti, I'm enduring all of this with a connection still to the States. So I'm living in Haiti as, let's call it, a middle-class person. You, by the best understandings of classes in Haiti, are also living kind of in a middle-class season through a very hard time that was even hard for us. Mm-hmm. I won't spend a ton of time in it, but from 2018 until 2020, my family, now I was making my way off the property and finding work most days, but my family, I think, had left less than 6 times the property. We were in a particular area where some of those main roads were our only ways to make it back into the city. So we were kind of pinned down in our little community. We could find local food at local markets. And from time to time, I could stockpile, just as you were talking about, stockpiling on gasoline, stockpiling on diesel, because it seemed like any other day, one of them was gone. You couldn't find gasoline on the island anywhere. Then all of a sudden there'd be diesel. And it was very, very hard pressed. Now, this is where I want to shine the light a little bit on our situation here with immigration and this, what seems to be a large surge of Haitians to the borders. Chile and Brazil had always been a place, or for a long time anyways, a place for Haitians to try to get to for working visas, to be able to try to provide income to send back home, to provide a better life for people back stateside. This is pretty normal. But once this happened in 2017, 2018, 19, and 20, we saw a much larger voyage. People that were able to obtain just an airline ticket and their Haitian passport were received as legal working citizens in these countries. And I would just say, for those that have opinions, those that may not be fully educated on these types of topics, any human being that has any love in their heart will do what is always best for their family and their loved ones. America is a wonderful place, and so many people do want to live here. I myself appreciate all of the wonderful things that have come from being born in America, but that is not the sole driving purpose. It truly is motivated out of love and a responsibility to care for the things that you're in charge of. And I say that because any of the people that were able to leave the island of Haiti, whether it be to another island in the Caribbean or to South America, it was first and foremost motivated out of being able to provide something more for their family. Obviously, we all may enjoy the liberties or the freedoms that come along with it. But as I have spent more and more time with people of the physically poorer class, their motives are not necessarily in just having more. It is to first and foremost provide for family and whatnot. So from 2018 to 2020, things never really got much better. You would have different days, different problems, different areas that were worse than others. But it just seemed like a new game of survival. Like you said, go bags all the time. Mm-hmm. You never could be at peace while driving. You always were thinking about your exit plan, where you could find safety, where you could find refuge. And so how did you end up in the States then?
Like you said, we were in surviving mode. We went from riding the storms, making, the best we possibly can, to give the kids an environment where they can thrive, not being able to go to a park,
Right.
or to a ball game, but we were still wanting to be there and be with the people, because Haiti, let me touch on this. If you have a heart for Jesus, if you have a heart for people, Haiti is an easy place, to fully invest, in that area.
Yeah.
So, during that whole time in 2018, going into 2019, I was able to stay at home and be busy. I have a wood shop, and the young men would just pop to my gate and see me working on something, and they came to send, to help, to do something, and that became my ministry focus, actually, welcoming these young men into my yard, into my shop, teach them the trade, teach them to fish, and minister to their soul in the process.
That's awesome.
And so I could do that right in my yard. That it's that easy, to find people that are available because of, sadly, because of joblessness.
I got to know the Moto boys in my neighborhood way better than I knew them the year before, because that was the only place I had to go and minister, was a walk down to get a soda or whatever and talk about the neighborhood.
So anyways, we gonna, fast forward, we had to helicopter out once from our backyard, because of all the issues, lockdown and all of that. So my wife ended up being pregnant, and our baby was due in December of 2019. And in November, as she was getting close to her due date, we experienced another lockdown. We were going into a 12-day lockdown where we couldn't go anywhere. Hospitals were running out of supplies. We had to use a back road to even go to church. That 2-hour church, that's about 1.5 miles from us. And my brother, who's a doctor, started being really concerned about us, because our first 3 kids were born in Haiti, and it was our plan for the 4th one to be born there as well. So when we realized, well, we are in a lockdown and we have no idea when it's going to stop. So my wife, so we decided to send my wife and the kids here in the United States, so she could be, where she would find healthcare.
Which, let's stop there for a second. What a privilege, right? So 12 million people on that island. Some of us, like you and I, whether we want to or not, we always kind of know in the background, especially for your wife, I can leave, right? Like, as the fire creeps in and gets closer and hotter, one advantage that I had that the people that lived outside of my gates did not have through all this time was to just be able to hop on a plane and go away. Now, getting to the airport was still very dangerous.
Absolutely.
Very dangerous. But the fact that that was an option, and I only say that because my greatest hopes, and you know this about me, is to try to paint in this particular instance, Haitians in the right corner. There's something that happens with the way the media shares things and the way government spin things, that it demonizes immigrants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because it is a law, right? So in the face of a law, it seems to be black and white, but there's a story behind it. There's a life behind it. So you're able to realize that we're in a long lockdown again. Hospitals, some of the hospitals didn't even have power.
Yeah.
Our main government power source, which is EDH, is going in and out because it needs fuel to work. So during that time, we have the least amount of power the island's ever had. So a lot of hospitals were even without power. So you're concerned, your brother who's a doctor is concerned, and you send your wife and kids, wife and children to the States.
Wife and children to the States. And I stayed back, for, work purposes. And
well, you got a home there. All of your life is
my
there.
home. That's where we built our lives. I mean, that was our plan. I mean, if we knew we would be leaving, we wouldn't make the investments we did, and it was never our plan. I mean, I want to mention this. My dad is 63.
Yeah.
For the first time in his life, he said if he could leave Haiti, he would.
I've heard that a lot.
That goes along with, my brother who's a doctor. I mean, all of us. It was never, back in the days, I was really, really protective and would get mad at people. I mean, I have my best friend, from high school that relationship broke because I was mad at him.
Because he wanted
he wanted to seek refuge in the United States. I mean, that was back when things were, more or less, we could go to college, we could go, and I saw him also as a great asset for the country too. He's a very talented musician, good guy. So I always wanted to keep, people who like me have a heart for the country, are able to contribute to the advancement of the country. I was very protective of them. I wanted them to stay and make a difference.
I know that feeling.
And sadly, back in 2018, when things really started to go downhill, and this is a place where, here in America, we say things could happen. Things do happen. We have bombing, we have mass shooting, but this is a place where you go out and you have no idea. Still, even though we know those things are happening here, we have on the road, and it doesn't even cross our mind that we may die on a car crash. But this is a place where, you go out, you don't think about a car crash. You don't think about, all you think about is that you may be shot while being on the road.
Yeah.
Or you may be robbed. And there's we don't have the luxury of calling the police because the police is powerless. So you have a people that is left on its own with no government.
Currently, even when it has a government, the government is hard to rely on. But right now, currently, what most people don't understand, and this is why the asylum plea is a real plea for Haitians that are here in America. They are being returned to a lawless country. We're fast forwarding a little bit, but the president that began all of this is the number one man in the country, what should be the most protected man in the country, was gunned down in his own home.
His own bedroom.
With what should have been 3 levels of guards around his home. As my phone blew up that morning for my Haitian friends to share that news with me, I was very surprised by the responses that I heard. First and foremost, no matter how much that president was hated, everyone was sad. Mm-hmm. Many knew and saw that day could come for him, but anytime a life is lost, there was sadness. But what went beyond that was that little bit of hope that sometimes is held onto by a Haitian, where they said, what country do I live in? Mm-hmm. Where the most coveted position in my entire country now lays dead, pleading for his wife in his own home, protected by what should have been his right-hand team. This is what I hope that our listeners kind of understand. And like I said, this is a big landing field and very difficult for anyone to really wrap their head around. But if you can imagine your greatest fears as an individual, but then even more so when you feel responsible for a family, when all of that's stripped from you, when you can't even look at your own children and promise them safety, promise them a meal to eat. This is not about working hard. It's about not even having the opportunity. And here is a man who worked his way from a level of Haitian to the president to meet his death as the leader of his country. That was the sadness that I saw come over my Haitian brothers and sisters, where they're like, I need to get out of here. And I think that's why your father said what he said, because the average Haitian person has a sense of pride to country because of what they have endured. Mm-hmm. They know their history better than anyone. Mm-hmm. And that has given them a sense of dignity and pride in, hey, we've survived hardship. But now they sit in a place where they're like, why would I even hope to ever be the president of my nation when I know I could be rejected, refused, and betrayed by my own countrymen?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I would honestly say, as it pertains to Jovenel, I did not see the actions of a good president, at least not as a person on the island. I did see the loss of a lot of things, but I don't know his real heart or what things he was pressed against. We all know that oftentimes in government, we may think we're the head of the government, but we have, the judicial system, the parliament, and all these other people over us. But
yeah, sadly, that's been the case, for many years. You have
no military and a police force. Before this problem, even during Martelly's time, the president before, you have police officers that are your only safety on the island that sometimes go months without pay. Exactly. How willing are you to do your job when you're on the streets, outgunned by the people on the streets, trying to do your job, and you don't even receive a paycheck? Mm-hmm. And their living conditions, we've seen some of their barracks, the ones that don't make enough money to have their own home yet. It's a very, very hard life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation.
Yeah. I'm just trying to paint the picture of why one would leave their country to try to go to another.
Mm-hmm. So, for in my situation, when my wife left, she was here, baby was born. We expedited his passport so we could get it as early as possible so we could return home, because it was our plan.
You were ready to go back to Haiti. Yeah.
So in February, I was back and forth, came here for his birth and went back home early January. And I came back to pick them up in February. And starting in January of 2020, we had a break from the protests, from the roadblocks. And all of a sudden, it was kidnapping.
Yeah, we went right into kidnapping.
Right into, that was our first year, their first year resolutions. We're going to kidnap as many people as possible.
And it was
15 people a day.
Yeah.
15 people were being kidnapped a day for ransom.
Which doesn't sound like a lot to maybe a listener, but when you start talking about 15 plus per day and 100% random, 100%. It felt like, there's people that line up every day to buy a lottery ticket in hopes to win, and it's millions of odds to one. Any day that you have to get on the road, it might be 1 in 1,000. Chances of being kidnapped.
And the amount of money they would ask those families was just
hundreds of thousands of those.
Ridiculous.
If they were a really nice car, sometimes even
some people would. It was random. It was not like upper class people. Never. You never heard about it. It was mostly the suffering, the press between the two middle class that was targeted. Anybody who thought, I want people to understand too that the gap between the lower and the upper class in Haiti is a chasm. How do you even describe it? You're talking million to zero.
You have people that have fully armored vehicles, which tend to be Land Cruisers. So you're talking about already a $75,000 vehicle then about a $25,000 upgrade for it to be armored, then a chauffeur that's usually driving it while being armed, and probably a special security dog like a Malinois that's been trained. And that's just one of many vehicles. They may even have a helicopter pad at their property. And their home in Haiti is maybe one of 3 homes in Haiti, including a beach house and one in their native country. And they have a home, typically Canada, Miami, or France.
Well, I'm glad I didn't have to tell you that. You know it. And so that's the gap between.
That's that group. Well, the other one has some sticks and a USAID tarp that is called their home.
So then you have people like me who love to work, who, to buy a vehicle, and I become a target. So, usually, because of that gap, they don't see me as a middle class. They see me as the people who are pressing them down, because that's mentality. People are like that because of that group of people. To some extent, it's true. We're not going to go into the details, but so anyways, for the first time, as I was leaving, my dad told me, "Hey Al, I know you love Haiti. You want to be back, but don't come back right now." Because neighbors would come to my dad and tell them that, "Hey, we see Al as a target," especially because I'm living with, an American, and the idea that, any association with Americans, made you a target because they would think money. If I get kidnapped, then my wife would find a way to bring money. So I still left home with a backpack, with the idea to come back. And my wife drove, and her mom drove all the way from Minnesota to Florida to meet with me there, so we could come home, as fast as we could. But when I got to Florida, my phone was blowing up with messages. Everybody that I know in Haiti texted me and said, "Al, don't come back. We know you want to be back. We know you love, your country, but don't return, because think about your family as your primary ministry." So that's when we decided, whoa, we should listen. My wife and I, we struggle with that idea. We struggle because, again, our kids were ready to go home. They came from the cold Minnesota, right? They were ready for some warm. They were ready for some warm weather, and they're what they were used to. Our dogs, their splash pool. Their beds. Their Ninja Warrior course.
Sleeping with a big fan.
Sleeping with a big fan. Exactly. Hearing the generator running at night. So. That was life.
The chickens that for some reason wake up at
the roosters. Exactly. That's home.
Life.
That's home. So finding ourselves in limbo, not being able to return home, and my wife and I decided.
So at this point, not being able to return home because COVID and flights and everything.
And COVID was a few weeks later. So my wife and I decided to wait it out, and I would be on the phone every single day with my brothers, asking them, "Hey, is there anything? Is there any improvement? Has anything changed?" And I'd get the same answer. Things are worsening. People are being kidnapped closer to home. And there's a police officer, a woman police officer, who lives right next to my house. And one night, actually the night before I came to the U.S., her gangs showed up and just started shooting through her windows, wanting to execute the entire family. Because there was a hunt after police officers, because the gangs were mad because they were being hunted by police officers and all that. So that's when we decided, well, this is serious. If we return to Haiti, it would be stupid. So we decided to wait, and 3 weeks later, as we were waiting, hoping to get a good answer, positive answer to go back, COVID hit. The whole country was shut down. The whole world was shut down on us. So the whole time I was on a tourist visa, again, because I never intended to stay here. And my tourist visa, which allowed me to stay here 6 months, was going to expire. So if I had gone back to Haiti, there was a chance that I would not be able to get in, because it would show that I spent more time here than I did in Haiti. So that's when we decided to go ahead and apply for residency, so that I could be with my family. And we really spent a whole year. We went back to Minnesota, I rented a house, and spent a whole year just looking for a positive outcome, in Haiti to go back. But unfortunately, every time we thought, man, this is the bottom of the pit, it's time to get back up. Things just, it was one thing after another.
It actually got hard to imagine, because during that time, you and I both were stateside. Mm-hmm. But I know the type of protection and people that there are to receive me in Haiti. And every time I would call them, this would be after, so March, April, May, must have been around May, when the flights opened back up. I needed to get down in June. All of our dogs, all of our things were there. And they were like, Joe, we're going to pick you up. This was a time where I was having armed escort, security escort, because we needed to figure out what we were going to do with our home and property and whatever. But when you thought it couldn't get worse, it continued to get worse all the way up until the president was hearing the president being murdered. And now it is by no means better. There are certain things that are result, and there are certain things that are worse now. What is worse right now is there is no law. There's no law, and the gangs have taken it as an opportunity to try to find power. You and I could spend a lot of time talking about that, and I think we'll have you back as a guest, even just to talk about Haiti life.